And I figured, as just kind of a way to pass the time here in the afternoon, I would read to you from City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. I'm not going to read to you from the opening essay. Now, the opening essay of City Builders and Vandals is probably the most important part. I instead have decided I'm going to read to you an essay in the book. It's called Trump versus Bezos, Three Major Divisions in the Ruling Class. And I am going to read you this essay because I think it's particularly relevant as we face the upcoming election. With the elections coming up in November, a lot of fear about what might happen, what might be the results. I think that this particular essay is timely. Considered to be the richest man on earth in terms of measurable wealth, and Donald Trump, arguably the most powerful man on earth in terms as president of the United States, are figuratively at each other's throats. The U.S. media is abuzz with talk of genital photographs, blackmail allegations, sexual misconduct, media bias. However, those who look deeper may see bigger differences and hidden rivalries at stake. Two hostile camps have emerged within the circles of American power. Notions that wars, political unrest, and clashes within society are the results of disagreements among a shadowy elite is a theme that repeatedly surfaces in art, culture, and fringe political discourse in Western countries. Aleister Crowley, the early 20th century occultist, was known for putting forward the concept of a hidden church that ruled the world. He presented his followers with the belief that shadowy societies and secret orders among the elite were behind the scenes, manipulating world events in order to serve their own ends. One of Crowley's novels, Moonchild, published in 1929, presented the First World War as a result from clashes among different factions of secret witches and wizards who controlled various governments. Crowley's occultist ramblings, most not presented as fiction, are easy to laugh at. To modern readers, they almost sound like a bizarre meeting between Alex Jones' broadcasts and J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter novels. However, Crowley's worldview is pretty well echoed today in the various conspiracy theories that fill the internet. In the early years of the 20th century, many anti-communist Roman Catholics began asserting that the Bavarian Illuminati, which was discovered and suppressed by the church in the late 1700s, was still active. Adherents of this theory argue that the wealthiest and most powerful people were all part of an anti-Christian secret society, and as part of it were manipulating world events and fomenting chaos. The former British athlete and sports commentator David Icke gained a significant following preaching that a secret race of reptilians controlled the world. The anti-Semitic conspiracy text, The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, is still widely circulated in many parts of the world. The notion that some shadowy group of hidden rulers is manipulating world events, and that the conflicts and clashes in politics and geopolitics represent something deeper and more cryptic, is certainly a prevalent belief within many different narratives written to explain it. In addition to all the various conspiracy narratives, there are some who have attempted to utilize political economy and historical materialism rather than mystical legends to develop a similar narrative. Karl Marx's pamphlet, The 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, describes a fight among the rich and powerful in France in the midst of an economic crisis. Marx described Louis Napoleon's Party of Order that seized power in 1851 as representing the finance capitalists and the farmers of France, and suppressing the industrial capitalists while enacting swift economic reforms in the hopes of restoring order and holding off revolution. In 1935, Georgy Dimitrov oriented the Communist International to make strategic alliances with democratic capitalists against a global fascist conspiracy, which he described as, quote, the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital. The Popular Front strategy of the communist movement was based on a division among the capitalists of the world between the democratic bourgeoisie and the fascist bourgeoisie. Carl Oglesby, the 1960s radical, penned a similar narrative during the 1970s, hoping to explain the divisions among the American elite. His text, widely circulated in leftist and progressive circles, was called The Yankee and Cowboy War, and attempted to explain the Vietnam War, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and the Watergate scandal in the context of clashing economic interests. When one examines Jeff Bezos and Donald Trump's disagreements, and the forces that line up behind one or other of the powerful men, one can see three primary divides among the circles of wealth and power in the United States. The first is a divide between allies of Saudi Arabia and allies of the Muslim Brotherhood. Jeff Bezos has spoken up and said that Saudi Arabia is possibly involved in efforts to embarrass him. He points out that the Washington Post, which he owns, has been harshly critical of Saudi Arabia for killing Jamal Khashoggi. He also emphasized the ties of Donald Trump and Saudi Arabia to the National Enquirer. It is true that in recent years, the Washington Post, long an outpost of apologism for U.S.-backed autocracies, suddenly became more critical of the Saudi monarchy. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who bashed Saudi Arabia on the campaign trail, has become a sharp defender of the Saudi monarchy. And while Trump has doubled down on supporting the Saudi kingdom, U.S. relations with Erdogan's government in Turkey have also declined. Meanwhile, Trump has echoed Saudi Arabia's allegations against the monarchy of Qatar. It's no secret to anyone that Saudi Arabia is the fountainhead of Wahhabism, an interpretation of the Islamic faith that mandates an autocratic government and a strict interpretation of the Quran. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia intentionally funds and promotes religious figures and institutions described as Wahhabis or Salafis, or sometimes called Deobandis in India and Pakistan, that promote this version of Islam. The Wahhabi networks of the Saudis have long been a source of revenue for Pentagon military contractors and a vehicle for waging proxy wars. Zbigniew Brzezinski arranged for the USA to support a young Saudi named Osama bin Laden, who was the wealthy heir of a construction firm. Bin Laden purchased huge amounts of weapons from the United States. Bin Laden purchased huge amounts of weapons from the United States and with CIA assistance built a Wahhabi army in Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union and topple the People's Democratic Republic. More recently, in Syria and Libya, the Saudis have purchased U.S.-made weapons and mobilized their Wahhabi networks to work against independent socialist governments. In both Syria and Libya, Wahhabi factions control a large amount of territory. It should be noted that the ISIL terrorists emerged from the larger Saudi-backed Wahhabi milieu. Another Islamic faction that has worked with U.S. intelligence in the Middle East is clearly at odds with Saudi Arabia. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt in 1928 as a group of small business owners who saw Western ideas, Marxism, and nationalism as the greatest dangers to the religious traditions of the Arab world. When Gamal Abdel Nasser took power and began moving Egypt toward Arab socialism, the U.S. government began covertly funding and supporting the Muslim Brotherhood to work against him. With funding and assistance of U.S. intelligence, the Muslim Brotherhood spread across the Middle East. It fed rural and poor Arabs and used them as foot soldiers against Baathism and Marxism. The Muslim Brotherhood is illegal in Saudi Arabia and is considered to be a terrorist organization. The Muslim Brotherhood opposes Wahhabism and rejects the notion of an absolute monarchy, favoring free markets and elected governments. The monarchy of Qatar is the primary funder of the Muslim Brotherhood, and its media, Al Jazeera, promotes an editorial perspective that is in line with the Qatari monarchy and the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan, the Turkish president, is seen as a close ally of the Muslim Brotherhood, and his government also echoes a similar worldview. During Obama's presidency, Qatari media, Saudi-funded Wahhabi preachers, the Muslim Brotherhood, and U.S. foreign policy all marched in lockstep. They targeted Syria and Libya, and despite their disagreements with each other. But now it seems that the Wahhabis and the Muslim Brotherhood are clashing. Jeff Bezos, the Washington Post, and the Democratic Party seem to be sympathetic to Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood, while Trump seems to be favoring the Saudi monarchy and Wahhabism. Why do some factions of the U.S. business elite favor the Saudis, while others favor the Brotherhood? This can be explained in the context of an ongoing feud between the intelligence agencies and the U.S. military. The U.S. military apparatus and the hundreds of billions of dollars spent on it are a huge subsidy to the economy. Arms exports by weapons manufacturers are also a huge moneymaker. The term military Keynesianism, which has been used to describe the astronomical military spending, which functions as a government stimulus which the U.S. economy could not do without. The many corporations involved in weapons manufacturing and export see a global arms race, the escalation of conflicts around the world, and the image of the USA as a mighty, warlike power armed to the teeth as in their financial interest. Trump has been very friendly to such forces, describing himself as eager to sell weapons, using the slogan "Peace through Strength" on the campaign trail. However, the intel agencies of the United States tend to favor a different foreign policy strategy. Intel agencies, staffed with graduates of Harvard and Yale, have carefully studied the art of soft power. They seek to present the United States as a friendly world power that rarely meddles in other nations' affairs. The CIA also works to present the United States as overcoming racism, embracing Islam and other cultures, and becoming a more benevolent country, disproving the propaganda of detractors. The intel agencies have mastered the art of manipulating global conflicts from behind the scenes, utilizing proxy forces, and crafting public opinion to fit U.S. foreign policy narratives. But now, as Trump insults the Muslims of the world, openly dismisses concerns about Saudi atrocities, the Muslim Brotherhood sees itself increasingly at odds with the White House. Not surprisingly, Qatar and Turkey are clashing with Saudi Arabia. Trump speaks of the importance of weapons sales from Saudi Arabia, pandering to the Pentagon and its suppliers. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos' ties to U.S. intelligence are no secret at all. Amazon has designed software and cloud services for intelligence agencies. But beyond Bezos' direct connections, the various Silicon Valley monopolies owe their very existence to funding from the American intelligence agencies. It was a strategic move to counter the Soviet Union during the late Cold War that paid off for the United States. The weapons manufacturers, who make loads and loads of money selling military hardware to Saudi Arabia, favor a very different strategy around the world than the Central Intelligence Agency that has spent years cultivating the Muslim Brotherhood as a useful proxy force. The two sections of the American state apparatus seem to be tied to opposite sides of the Trump-Bezos disagreement. However, there is another long-standing clash among the elite that is also at play. This is a fight between the rich and the ultra-rich. Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, according to some calculations. Bezos fits in with a crowd of people in the United States that could accurately be called the ultra-rich. Family names like Morgan, Carnegie, DuPont, Mellon, Rothschild, and Rockefeller make up a special class of untouchable entrenched power that goes back for generations. The United States has over 1 million millionaires and many billionaires, but most of them are not in this select group. The Rockefeller family of Standard Oil, Chase Bank, and the Council on Foreign Relations, and a score of powerful think tanks and lobbies have far more influence than a typical millionaire or billionaire could ever dream of. The Rockefeller family were the primary financial backers of Planned Parenthood, abortion, birth control, experimental art, and the legalization of pornography. The Rockefellers funded and promoted the work of Alfred Kinsey, during the 1950s, and widely circulated social research that showed that a more tolerant attitude toward homosexuality and the sexual revolution of the 1960s should be permitted. The Rockefellers are tied closely with U.S. intelligence agencies. The Council on Foreign Relations is primarily funded by ExxonMobil, the direct descendant of John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. Art projects sponsored by the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom program during the 1950s and 60s often received grants and promotions from Rockefeller foundations. Representing this stratum of ruling families, Warren Buffett famously said, "Tax me more," after the financial crisis, arguing that Keynesian welfare state solutions should be explored. Why do the richest of the rich favor a more left-wing economic policy? Because they can afford it. Higher taxes will barely dent their astronomical piles of wealth, and they can easily skate the tax collectors with their elaborate networks of foundations and trusts to conceal their vast and often incalculable wealth. It should be no surprise that Foreign Affairs, the publication of the Rockefellers, touted, quote, "the social democratic future of the USA" in 2014. However, among the wider circles of wealth and power in the United States, there is huge resentment against the ultra-rich. The fracking cowboys of oil and gas resent the near monopoly status of the big four super major oil companies tied to Wall Street banks. The owners of retail giants resent Jeff Bezos, pushing them off the market with online shopping. Trump has openly complained about alleged special treatment for Amazon from the U.S. Postal Service. These lower levels of the rich, these cockroach capitalists, favor a more libertarian economic approach. They tend to truly believe the economic theories that say capitalism can create a market utopia, and they tend to be less convinced of the need for social welfare programs and regulations in order to hold off the threat of unrest. Betsy DeVos, the education secretary of the Trump administration, is a wealthy woman. But what is the source of her wealth? She is the heir to the fortune created by Amway, the multi-level marketing corporation widely decried as a pyramid scheme. The fact that a fundamentalist Christian associated with selling Tupperware is allowed to run the U.S. Department of Education, not some carefully trained and cultivated Harvard graduate with the blessing of the Rockefellers and DuPonts, has got to be a point of contention between Trump's coalition of new money and the old establishment of ultra-rich families. In 2004, liberal radio commentator Garrison Keillor accurately articulated the sentiments among the ultra-rich, describing the Republican Party as, quote, "a party of hairy-backed swamp developers and corporate shills, faith-based economists, fundamentalist bullies with Bibles, Christians of convenience, freelance racists, misanthropic frat boys, shrieking midgets on AM radio, tax cheats, nihilists in golf pants, brown shirts in pinstripes, sweatshop tycoons, hacks, fakers, aggressive dorks, and Lamborghini libertarians." Trump represents the fracking companies, the hotel and restaurant chains, Sheldon Adelson's Nevada-based empire, sports team owners, and other wealthy people who have been locked out of the club that traditionally runs the U.S. government. The fact that Trump enacted such dramatic reforms to the federal prison system should not be shocking either, as it seems that so many of the wealthy people who have gone to federal prison for financial crimes are among his backers. Trump stands with the Wall Street execs who cannot buy their way out when they are charged for insider trading or tax fraud. Donald Trump is himself a real estate mogul. He was able to rise to prestige among the wealthy by manipulating the media and fighting dirty in struggles for valuable New York City property. His presidency, almost universally opposed in the mainstream media during the campaign, represents an upsurge among the rich against the ultra-rich like Jeff Bezos. Ronald Reagan was known for constantly reminding other American politicians, quote, "We are all friends after 6 o'clock." And in his time, this was mostly true. Disagreements on policy and strategy were secondary. The enemy was Soviet communism. The goal was U.S. hegemony, and the sources of financial backing for major political figures were often identical. The stakes in American politics were not very high, and the significant political debates were often overcompensating in complexity for what they were lacking in substance. However, in recent years, it seems pretty clear that America's political elites are not friends after 6 anymore. Astute scholars of American history will recall incidents like the caning of Charles Sumner, when Southern racist Congressman Preston Brooks violently attacked his anti-slavery colleague on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1856. Disagreements among the ruling elite and Bonapartist maneuvers by different factions to suppress the other seem to be a defining aspect of America in 2019. And that was my essay. You can find it in my book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. And I hope that that explains this division in the ruling class, because there is a big fight in the ruling class right now.